Mirror, Mirror. I'm your host, Alex Haynes, and I'm here with the knowledgeable Dr. D, co-founder and president of Sonell Hills. And today's episode is, why don't I look perfect? And I guess the question is, doctor, what is perfect?
Yeah, I think for our purposes here, what seems to inform perfect is what social trends make perfect look like, right?
Right.
So whatever you're consuming, and there's a lot to consume today with media, digital and otherwise. So what are you consuming in media that's telling you this is good, this is bad? And I think maybe somewhat naturally, people look at that and kind of go, that must mean this is where I fit in or don't fit in. And if you don't fit in, well, I guess that's code for not perfect.
Right. And I think especially for what you specialize in, doctor, which is the dealing with mental health disorder of not trying to be healthy, but how you get there. I think that's what you said to me at one point. You said, it's not the problem that people want to lose weight, it's how they get there and what happens and the things they do to get there that then cause compounding issues, right?
Yeah, very true. Very true. So I think one of the messages that a lot of advocates for health in terms of eating disorders have been trying to put out there is don't focus so much on numbers. Don't focus so much on specific weight loss targets because often that ends up being actually the gateway to make sort of eating disorders either worse or maybe even the initial steps of what takes somebody who's at risk into an ill and active state of food restriction, severe dieting, etc. So yeah, going back to your point, I think the how matters a lot. Maybe it's worth talking about how are people reacting to what the social message is? What is the social message? How's that message changing?
And I think you nailed it. Like, let's face it. We live in a world where media is everywhere. It's on our phones. It's on TVs. There are digital billboards when you're driving down the road that will tell you what you should look like, how you should think, and how you should act. We just can't get away from that messaging. And that messaging is what, doctor? What is the world telling us that's wrong?
Yeah, I mean, people are trying to send the idealized version of something. And when that idealized version of something includes a person, it's obviously going to present to you, when I look at quote unquote idealized version of people, family, individual, whatever, then it should look like this, right? It should be this shape. It should be this color. It should be whatever, this form. They should be doing these things. And so, the most relevant for us ends up being shape, size, etc., because, that's especially for those who are at risk. It sends the message that, this thing I was thinking about, or these eating disorder voices that are kind of messing with how I'm eating or, what I'm doing that's messing up my health, they're right. Look, everywhere I look, this is what's coming at me. So what's the confusion here? The eating disorder sort of trend is the right thing. And so let's go at it.
Right. And there's so many there's so much misinformation about what beauty is. And let's face it, I work in media, I work in marketing, and there is something to be said that the media will try to put forth that super thin airbrushed model that's not real because they're touched up in a program to go, this is what beauty looks like. Now, we talked that there are been some groups that have started a trend toward wholeness, but it's few and far between. So would it be okay, and feel free to correct me, Doc, you are the expert here. Would it be okay for me to say that the world pushes a super thin model, this 0 fat percentage, this super cut for guys, like super muscular, and it's just not realistic?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not realistic for everyone, right? Like, because again, if you kind of look at it from the point of view of how do you get there, it sets up a pretty big dissonance between this is where I'm at, this is what that ideal is. So, okay, therefore, there's all these things wrong with my physical appearance. Instead, what might be more helpful, and, certainly as we get older, which, is what I'm dealing with, is you gotta find ways to be fit, even though maybe you're busy, doing your work or whatever. And the fitness is more about what you're doing, right? So it's less about like, oh, this is the image, this is the picture, whatever. It's more about what are the steps you're taking to increase your body's capability to manage, I don't know, cardiovascular health or stamina or endurance, whatever metric it is, you want to try and improve. But those are all processes that you can work on. There's a roadmap to get there, and it's not this, yes or no answer on like, oh, you fit that model, you fit that snapshot, or you don't. And if you don't, bad. So do whatever you need to get there. Because if you're not looking like that, something's wrong with you. And so in the folks, again, going back to our earlier point, in the folks where they're vulnerable to doing things that are going to harm them through disordered eating, this is kind of rocket fuel, because it's reinforcing this gap between this is how I see myself, this is how I need to be, and it's kind of increasing that pressure differential, so you're going to go at it harder. And it's going to be much more difficult for voices of reason, treatment, whoever, to get in there and say, no, you don't have to kind of buy into this idealized view. That's not real. All the things you said. You got to listen to you as an individual. What is reasonable for you to do as a next step so that you can meet health-related goals that will basically keep you, sort of at your optimal trajectory based on age, etc.
I love what you said about being the optimal you and finding what you should look like, because I think there's a stigma, and you said this before we started the podcast, there's a stigma of the world needs to tell you how you should look. And if we try to say, no, that's not true, then we're told, well, you're wrong. Mm-hmm. Right. And how does someone who is potentially struggling with these voices telling them they need to be thinner, they're not pretty enough. Yeah. Like you said, this is rocket fuel. How do we help them combat this? Where do they start?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, obviously one way, hopefully, is platforms like what we're trying to do here. And, other people have tried this in various ways. Hopefully they continue, so that there's voices that are actually discussing these tensions, because the messaging is out there. And so really all we can do is say, okay, let's bring in all the messaging that's out there and start to kind of parse it, so that we can say, hey, does that really make sense to you when you think about it? Is that sort of quote unquote beauty standard reasonable? Maybe fun to chat about or look at it in a magazine, whatever, great. But, to then kind of act on it in ways that are messing with you and maybe putting you in real harm, there's got to be a conversation possible there that hopefully gets through. So my hope is that kind of conversation in all the various ways it can happen needs to happen more and more. So when somebody is looking at stuff online, social, digital, whatever, they have choices that are not simply the distortion we're talking about.
Yeah.
And by the way, we didn't even touch on this, but what's coming and is already there is the potential of AI image and video, right? Because you can literally make that look how you want it, right? Literally, from your words to the picture. So we haven't even seen really the full potential of how this can play out. It's really sort of weaponizing body image distortion, and sort of idealizing stereotypes that sort of really put a lot of people at risk, when instead what they should be focusing on is what's right for me. Let's have that conversation about, like, are you doing all the things that are going to keep you healthy?
So, Doc, if I wanted to be counterculture, so the world says you're not pretty enough, we would say you are pretty enough, right? You as a unique individual are beautiful, amazing, and capable. That you don't have to believe that you're not enough, because you are. You are made uniquely to be a certain way. Your body was coded. You did studies about the body and biology and the mind and all these other things, right? So are people built uniquely?
I mean, genetically for sure, right? So genetic diversity is the starting point, right? So, and especially in the US, which is massively multicultural, right? Like not many countries are like this anywhere in the world. So if you kind of start from that baseline of pretty significant genetic diversity, that's your blueprint. And then that's what's interacting with the environment, right? So, how do you live? What do you eat? How do you kind of go through your day in terms of what you're doing, not doing? Where does the energy go? Where does the energy come from, right? At least as it pertains to health, weight, metabolism, those are some factors. And so going back to your thing about uniquely you, well, one of the biggest things you have in your favor as an individual is your choice, right? You get to make those choices. I mean, yes, there's a lot of influences that are kind of messing with you, many of which you don't even necessarily recognize or know. But at the end of the day, hopefully somebody, including you, is probably reminding yourself, hey, I can still make some choices. And maybe a lot of them aren't easy because of those social influences, right? Societal influences. Because like everything's skewed sort of in a certain direction, or maybe because of convenience or whatever else, right? Like because the food that's available, as an example, is often what sets the standard, right? Because if you have to work really hard to get the food that's actually good for you, well, guess what's going to happen? Push come to shove, right? You're not going to get there a lot, even though you know and you really want to do that. And then there's the issue of, socioeconomic aspects, because I think in society today, at least in the US, often the quote unquote food that's better for you is much more expensive.
Yeah, that's really weird, right? The good food that's like from the farm is way more expensive than the super processed, unhealthy food.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is, I'm not an economist or whatever area this falls into, so I don't know that I'm the expert on this. My kind of simple-minded way to think about this is, I think one of the big things that the U.S. has done over, century and more is standardization and industrialization leads to lowering cost. So of everything, and food also falls in that. And the advantage of that is literally anybody who wants food can now be able to access that food, right? Because the cost has been driven so low. The casualty of that is because now you're using essentially an engineering approach to it, it's not a lot of say in terms of the end result and where it started. So technically something you're holding is chicken, but it's only technically chicken because God knows what happened to it from the moment it actually somehow was related to a live chicken. And you have lots and lots of examples of this. And so, they provide calories, it's got all the features you'd think of from an engineering perspective. But then all these kind of changes that are happening are gonna likely have a metabolic impact once you become fully dependent on this lowest common denominator of food as your only food source. If you're mixing it up, 10 different ways, it'll probably average out, right? So any one thing won't have a big effect. But if that's kind of what you're going with, you're not doing a lot of the other things you should do, like make sure you have a lot of fresh sources of food. So there's vitamins in there, there's, good sources of fiber and enough servings of those things. Then, you can balance it out. But if that's not happening, because all those things are a higher bar, right? Because fresh things go bad. That's the whole special thing about fresh stuff, fresh food. So, which means now you have to plan for that. And in some cases, depending on where you live, or quote unquote, as they call them, food deserts, at least for fresh food, that can be a problem. Because, I got to go X distance, which is X time, which is, okay, does that fit into kind of what I need to do just for my job, work, whatever? And so you're just adding all the barriers because the prioritization, whether regionally or nationally, is not on that. And so ultimately what you end up with is, again, back to lowest common denominator. The thing that is technically chicken. Okay, great. Let's go with that. And that'll live in your freezer forever, right? Until the next ice age. In which case you can just leave it out, right? Doesn't even need to be in a freezer.
And then it'll probably evolve into chasing you because it was technically chicken.
Yeah, I hope not. That's like maybe a Halloween special. But just a simple example. And that applies to all kinds of food categories because it's that same sort of, again, very, at least in my mind, very simplistic idea of like, mass production, industrialization, bring down the cost, massively distribute, which again, it really serves an important purpose because if you don't have that backbone, then scarcity is going to be real, and cost issues. But the flip side of this is it's emphasized production away from, hey, people need to have access to fresh food in all these different ways that are not, processed so much that you can't tell where it started. And then the rest of, how folks function needs to incorporate that. Because if that's how you grew up, so then there's other factors, right? This is just a societal aspect. Then there's other aspects of like, what was the norm when you grew up, right? What do people do? Because if you are not using sort of outside information, you're using the template that you were given basically as you grew up. And say now, okay, you can afford more things. Okay, great. But if your model is still, I got to take the thing from the freezer, I do this, and that's all there is to it. Great, I'm full, life is good. Then you're not necessarily even asking the question, okay, is there a problem with this? So, this is multi-level. And so, there's examples out there. You can look at Europe, Asia, everywhere else, where they may not necessarily have much more money or a lot of other advantages that the US has, but they do seem to have or seem to value cultural traditions around food, which have kind of stuck around for a very, very long time. And I think in some cases that ends up being protective. So because they kind of, create that ritual around like, hey, this is how you should be making this thing. This is how a meal should look. This is how your approach to eating should be.
Not everything should be wrapped and given to you through a drive-through window?
Right, or with a robot next. Again, it's always that trade-off between convenience and whatever else.
And like you said, this goes back to choice. And we started this conversation with understanding that some people, all of us, at some point struggle with the concept, am I pretty enough? Mm-hmm. What is the culture telling me? And that leads to all these choices we have to make. Mm-hmm. Going back to that original, why can't I be as pretty? Why can't I be perfect? I think is what we asked. Mm-hmm. And you said it comes down to choice. Mm-hmm. What are the choices what should be people making? Going back to that original statement, how can we help them combat that first initial statement? Because it's a wrong statement, right? Am I right in that? That's just the wrong thing to start with.
Yeah, because if you're starting with this idea that I need to look a certain way, that is essentially assuming this, let's say beauty standard is achievable and it's appropriate for that person. And, I think one of the unique things about the US then becomes problematic because that multicultural, diverse aspect now becomes, it needs to look one way. Which obviously doesn't make sense because if each of those individuals were growing up wherever they were growing up, or if they lived in whatever culture of origin they are, or sometimes that doesn't even apply because maybe it's a mix of cultures, and then what do you do then? What is the standard? I don't know, right? But it's to ask that question of like, is this reasonable? And I think the first step is really to question and say, yeah, somebody's selling me this beauty standard. Well, good for them. Good luck. But that doesn't mean I have to adopt it. But I think that may be harder to do than to say.
I love what you just said. I don't have to adopt that.
No.
I think that statement is the first answer. And correct me if I'm wrong. When you start thinking, why can't I be perfect? That next thing, well, I don't have to adopt their standard. Mm-hmm. I am already potentially perfect. I don't have to lose all this extra weight, because that's really what happens, right? They get in this mindset, they have to hit this and look a certain way, and they do that by massively losing all this weight. Is that really where some of these?
Yeah, I mean, the drive for thinness, certainly in anorexia, has that kind of storyline. And often it's actually from weight ranges that there's not a ton to lose. So it's not, it's very distorted. The thinking is very distorted in those disorders where you're starting from a place where, really nobody's telling you, hey, there's an issue here metabolically. Like what you're eating, what your physiological need is completely out of whack. No, nobody's telling you that. But in their head, because they're driven by quote unquote a certain body image, etc., they just link that to directly, I got to eat this or not eat this and this much. And, the rest is essentially physics because you put in less energy and you're still spending a ton of energy. You're going to keep losing weight until your body's like, I'm done. So
that's a problem because then you cease to exist.
Right. Yeah. Anorexia, I mean, eating disorders have very high mortality. Anorexia is like one of the highest mortality in psychiatry, really, for any mental health problem. So it's big issue.
And that's why we want to talk about it. We want to shine that light on this problem. And like you said, it starts from a place of some people are trying to be healthier. They think they need to be better, but really they're already there. They don't really need to lose.
Yeah, in some cases, I don't know what objective standard one might use, but if you just use any kind of usual performance, fitness, etc., metrics, they're probably just as good as anybody else could be. But in the case of an eating disorder, it's not really those facts that are driving the action. It's distortions that are, now I think the world is very familiar with this word hallucination, but because of AI. But basically, it's sort of like that. It's something that's literally not real, completely made up, that is driving the thinking that says, oh, I got to be this other number, whatever that is. And so notice, it's not at all about, oh, what is the functional thing it's helping me with? What am I trying to solve? It's none of those things, right? It's about the specific goal that is basically out of nowhere and continues to drive them not just to that number, most often, certainly when they come to us at the residential levels, well past the number. And they've just realized, hey, I thought I could control it. I thought this was all like totally scripted, working. But no, they crash through that number and they're well past it. They're like, okay, now I'm scared. Which, by the way, we may have touched on this earlier, but one of the unique things about many folks with eating disorders is they have these traits that actually allow them to do this, right? Because by and large, you hear all the stories about like, I'm going to diet, I'm going to lose weight, all this stuff. But often that's very hard to do because the physiological drive to eat is very strong, right? So it's your brain is wired to sort of basically take food, which is what is it? It's a bunch of chemical compounds, molecules, right? It's this matter that is basically digestible, which may have no value except your brain says, oh, yummy. And so for various things. And so you look at that, you want to eat it. It gives you that hit in terms of reward. And you're like, all right, keep doing it. Until hopefully there's an endpoint, which is like your satiety. So that's your loop. And when that system is not working, that's what you see as an example in anorexia. Because that feedback loop is broken. It's kind of doing completely different things. And again, we can get to that at some point in terms of, what does the brain look like? But at that point, if the messaging is reinforcing, yeah, do that, do more of that, it's kind of a tough problem.
Yeah, it sounds very difficult to deal with. And like you said, and I think in an earlier episode, it's a slippery slope. It's easy to fall into this trap because, like you said, their goal wasn't, I'm going to lose 50 pounds, is I'm going to lose 5 or 10. And then it just keeps going. They can't stop.
Yeah.
Right. What other stigmas? Because we mentioned earlier, we're going to talk about stigmas, right?
Mm-hmm.
What other stigmas are surrounding this that we want to highlight because sometimes you just got to put it out there and go, this is a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the emerging ideas in eating disorders, which, I think you'll hear a lot about in the treatment community is the abbreviation HAES,
HAES?
Yeah.
And what does that
4
stand for?
letters. Health at every size.
Oh, okay. This is your beautiful body no matter what size you are.
Exactly.
You know, there's some companies that have started embracing this.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Which is great. I think you and I were talking, like Dove has done this for women specifically.
Right.
Even, and we made a joke about this off camera, but like Victoria's Secrets now is actually doing some stuff. And you made a great comment about, you know, that's great. It's still awful, but it's a little bit better.
It's crack cocaine light instead of crack cocaine.
Yeah.
So maybe you shouldn't be in the drug business, but
yeah, it's a little bit better.
Yeah.
But we are starting to see a societal shift where we are championing health at every size.
Yeah. And you know, there's obviously like any such thing, which is, you know, I think sort of a bold position. You're going to get pushback. You're going to get all these questions around it because clearly not everybody at every size is in the best health, right? So if your metric is about health, then that kind of creates this natural tension and conflict. And so I think the way to resolve that is to say, okay, like we talked earlier, each person is starting with a different blueprint. And that to me is kind of where that health of every size comes from, because it's basically saying your template of the operating space that is good for you is unique. And, you know, that could be a function of like, hey, you're like single ethnicity, you're multi-ethnic, whatever. So all that's going to inform genetically like where things work best. So then you take that and you say, okay, what is the best I can do with this? To me, that, you know, is the easiest to make sense out of, rather than these global statements around like, oh, it can only be a certain way, or, you know, no, people should never accept health at every size, which is, again, obviously the pushback. So I don't know that those sort of conflict conversations are necessarily all that helpful. I think it's better to kind of go back to kind of the biological basis of this and say, hey, you know, the fact is there is diversity in where people are coming from. And so give credit to that diversity and optimize in a personalized way. And hopefully with, you know, the advances in all the different technologies, tools, biomedical, genetic, etc., metabolic, we'll get there so that we can have sort of more personalized roadmaps, which is, I think, part of the problem, is that you're trying to generalize for a population that doesn't quite fit that generalization. So when you do that, then there's going to be casualties.
I 100% agree. We've talked off podcasts about, you know, each of our individual health journeys. I'm on one, and I love what you said about this blueprint. And I call it a journey, because every so often you making a slight adjustment.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to get to a healthier, better version of you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to change depending on where you're at. Mm-hmm. And I've been talking to people about this, and some people are trying to lose the weight. Mm-hmm. Some people need to gain the weight. Mm-hmm. And some people are just trying to maintain. Mm-hmm. Right? And you are always somewhere in one of those three areas, and there's no magic number. And for me, we talked about adolescence in another episode. Like high schools or middle school will tell you, if you're this tall, you should weigh this much, and if you're over that number, you're fat.
Right.
And this starts this problem, because I'm like, yeah, he's 5'10", but he's got muscle. Because he's got muscle, you're calling him fat, and he's got nothing on him. You're wrong. Right?
Well, and I honestly, you know, going back to that, as well as the other thing you said about, you know, people gaining, losing weight, it's not necessarily even, I mean, the most productive way, at least, you know, that I would suggest looking at these problems is the process, right? So when you look at the day-to-day, what's happening, right? So is the food intake looking reasonable? Is it balanced? Does it have all the different components? Is it meeting the physiological need that the person requires to function, to do the things they want to do, right? Maybe somebody's super active, maybe another person's not that active. Their needs are going to be different. You can't just have one number that says, oh, that's the right number. So to me, if you approach it from that process aspect, the outcome will take care of itself, right? So then you don't have to worry about like, oh, this number is this or that, or it's too high, too low, because you're dealing with the how, which is honestly the harder problem. But I think it's a good problem to take on. And And how you deal with it will also going to vary. So far, we've talked about diversity genetically, otherwise, but there's also diversity in what is doable for people, right? For some people, they love running. Other people love, I don't know, your machines, whether it's a treadmill, rower, whatever. Other people like doing long walks. Other people love to hike, whatever, right? Everybody's got something they're good at, or it's like easier for them to do. Because again, all these are great ideas, but if you don't do them, it's like nothing happened. So you're not really helping yourself. So part of that diversity is also getting to what's going to work for you. And there has to be flexibility around that problem solving, which then will help you see, okay, what is the target I can get to here, right? Because, okay, you can actually manage eating the right combination of things throughout the day, right? But then the second part of that is, what is the energy output looking like? And how is the energy output actually improving your body? And mentally too, because, as like most people will tell you, sunlight is good for mood. So you want to spend some amount of time out there getting that exposure. You want to be active, which is also another form of that. And some of this will be uphill tasks, right? It'll be very hard because maybe some people have chronic conditions or other issues. But honestly, it's still worth it in the way that you can make it happen in a reliable way. And it's certainly hard for me. Like, I'm not one of these people where it's like, oh, I'm going to run 5 miles every day. And, love to, not going to happen. So,
I like the idea.
Yeah.
I physically don't like doing it though.
Right. I'll let somebody else do it.
Yeah.
So
I literally watch TV shows of other people working out. I'm not going to lie.
But that's like, that's not good either, right? Like, at least for me, where I'm like, okay, to kind of maintain a certain level of function, which, by the way, takes more and more energy as you get older. Like, there's more you have to do to kind of keep up. That's kind of what the data shows. And there's also gender differences, like what goes in. There's like recent studies. It's like, men have to do more in terms of certain physical activity than women for sort of that net benefit, at least from a cardiovascular perspective. There's all these, details you got to work through that are part of that personalization. But bottom line, you have to get to these, activities in a way that are going to happen.
I think that's part of the stigma as well in this whole conversation. Is it comes down to, and we're just gonna be honest, choices, your personal choices. Mm-hmm. You have to take ownership. The world's gonna tell you a million different things, right?
Yeah, and maybe to loop back to the, stigma and, social messaging, etc. Maybe the other messaging is, don't be part of that choice of spreading the stigma, and don't be a repeater for that, and maybe be kind of a resistor to the stigma, maybe a resistor to the messaging that is harmful, because that is, again, speaking of choice, that's something each of us can do. So if we can stand up for that and sort of at least not multiply it, maybe at some point it turns. The tide turns, and people are like, yeah, this is, now we're doing. But I don't know. From a commercial angle, I'm not really expert on that, but at some point that has to shift. And like you said, yeah, there are some companies starting to sort of see that there's value in sending out the right message. But, I don't feel like we're flooded with the right message at this point yet.
Oh, I 100% agree.
Yeah.
We get flooded with the wrong message. Yeah. And to your point, this is why people struggle. And this is why, to turn it a little bit, shamelessly to what you offer, what Sonoma Hills does is to help people deal with these issues when they've struggled for so long to find behavioral fixes, right? Mm-hmm. And you deal with those stigmas here at Sonoma Hills, right? Yeah.
So that, hopefully we're able to sort of convey also the thinking behind a lot of the behavioral approaches we're using, right? So the behavioral approaches are to meet the clinical milestones. But then in addition to that, hopefully what we're also doing is saying, hey, look, whenever these doubts come up, whenever you run into problems, there's relapses, maybe people around you are saying one thing or another that doesn't make it easy for you. Well, take a step back, and this is the framework, right? The individual aspects, health at every size, all these sort of anchors of how to think about where you're going with the recovery process.
The last stigma I think too we should probably talk about is they think they're alone. How many people think, you might be even watching or listening to this podcast thinking, well, you don't understand. I'm struggling because it's a battle in your own mind. Yeah. You feel isolated, but there's so many people going through this. I'm sure you have some stats or some numbers that would shock our audience of how many people struggle with eating disorders.
Yeah, it's a few percent of the population, right? Like, so if you start with 300 million people, so out of 100 million, 1% is 1 million, right? Mm-hmm. So 300 million, it's 3 times that. And that's for 1%. And if you just aggregate all the different kinds of eating disorders, it's a few percent. So it's another multiple of that. So we're talking about millions of people. This is not some tiny number. So that's one. But the other thing is, going back to your point about, the isolation in a way, because, with some exceptions, a lot of the stuff is maybe not visible. One, people don't necessarily see that, or maybe don't incorporate that into how they're interacting. But then the other is that sort of dealing with the disorder in secrecy compounds the sense that you're not, you're kind of going through this alone in a way where something's specifically wrong only with you.
It's that factor. It's like a shame factor. You feel isolated, then you feel ashamed because you don't feel like you can approach anyone about it. Right. So you're not getting the help, which then makes you feel worse, which leads to more bad decisions. Right. And this cycle of just downward spiral happens, right?
Yeah. So I think that's something often people realize when they come into treatment. They're like, oh, I heard all these people kind of talk and feel and express very similar things to what I've been experiencing. So in a way, it's sort of a relief that, I'm not just this odd one out that somehow is, very messed up in a very particular way. And so hopefully that allows them to sort of say, okay, well, everybody else is going through treatment. They're trying to make the right decisions. They clearly show that their recovery matters, so my recovery should matter too. And that gives a little more, hopefully energy to that effort to say, no, you're not alone in this. Lots of people recognize this as an issue. You're actually jointly making the progress where you can hopefully even learn from other people who've been through maybe a couple of cycles of some version of the disorder you're dealing with. So I think that's actually a mainstay of a lot of our current treatment modalities, right, in the field, is that they're group-based exactly for that reason. Because you're able to learn from things that people have gone through without having to actually live through that. And hopefully that compresses the time in which you're learning, and then it makes the process hopefully a little more effective.
I love that. So if you are listening to this podcast, watching it on YouTube or watching a video, seeing a reel, and you're wondering, where do I start? How do I get that help? Maybe you're struggling. Someone who's struggling. You're worried about your adolescent is struggling. We'd love for you to reach out to Sanel Hills. You can go to the website, sanelhills.com. There's buttons there that will get you more information. There's phone numbers, and we just want to be a resource, right, Doc?
Yeah, and my hope is that, our admissions folks can be a resource to guide in whatever direction makes sense. Maybe, share some options, at least refer you to someone where, maybe they'll give you more information that's local and relevant to you. Start some conversations around like, hey, look at this thing because it doesn't seem right. Seems like somebody is going downhill, or it's kind of getting risky or dangerous in terms of whatever the disorder is. So our hope is we can be that entity. And so, the podcast is an effort to start to have these conversations. I mean, it's kind of interesting in my practice where, mostly treating disorders, some of the folks who've kind of been through that process over many years with me that, as they're kind of coming out of it, doing more and more things in real life and functioning better, they've sort of joked with me about like, we should write a book. And, because they'll say these things that are so sort of clear and almost deep in the way they're conveying some truth about recovery that they've sort of realized. I'm like, I wish, that can be shared, etc. So, and so this topic of like some way sharing these various things, experiences, journeys has come up a bunch of times. So my hope is, we're able to do a little bit of that through this podcast, was because we haven't really done a lot of it through the website in sort of a general educational format. And, we've done some talks, and I've had, longer session talks about various aspects of eating disorders that various organizations ask for. But our hope is that this will be a more organized list of topics we can go through, and maybe easier to digest than maybe a formal presentation of some sort.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those watching, one of the things you can do to help, obviously hit that like button, hit that share button, because that's going to help us reach more people, share this message, start that conversation, and of course, reach out to us. This has been Mirror Mirror. We'll catch you in the next episode.